Hello, this is the video lesson plan for Rocketry, an introduction to Rocketry as a science for the mission team members in the 3rd class. The key points that this is really an introduction to Rocketry, and we want the team members to get a good understanding of what rockets are, who were the key pioneers in the past in Rocketry, what some of the first rockets were, and also to get them better acquainted with why there are so many different types, what the different shapes and sizes mean in terms of the different missions that these rockets carry out. The key points that we want the mission team members to take away are an overall history of the rockets, who some key rocket pioneers are, how rockets work, and then also different types of rockets and their role in the overall exploration of space. A brief summary of the lesson plan is we'd like you to go through a brief history of the rockets. This is all this material is found on the websites. Starting back with, did the kids even know that 2,000 years ago was the first time that rockets were actually invented over in Italy? We also want them to know that fireworks that they see on the 4th of July, those are rockets. There's also rockets when they were first created in the United States and in Europe. Practically, they were used for war means and delivering. They were used as missiles in war to deliver payloads. But after that, more in the 1950s, we shifted from using them in war to using them to explore space and to try to land on the moon. The other aspect of this lesson is to get them acquainted with rocket principles. And for that, since they're 3rd graders, we want them just to understand that Newton's laws of for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So one of the activities is to give each mission team member a balloon, have them blow it up, and release it and ask them why the balloon moved forward. And it moved forward because there was air released at one end, and so the balloon was propelled forward the other end. And that's the basic concept of a rocket as well. The other aspect of the lesson we want them to take away is to think about rockets in terms of their overall size, shape, and the features. And for that, you'll have a handful of slides to go over with them and to really spur their discussion. So there's a list of questions in the lesson plan, and if you want, there's questions and there's answers and there's things just to trigger them. We want you to be able to just informally with them, ask them questions, get them to think creatively, and also get them to recount what they learned in the lesson. So one of the first questions, what were the first modern rockets that were used? Ask them who the first person in space was. Ask them who the first person was that landed on the moon, possibly who the first woman in space was. Also, in terms of size and shape of rockets, why did we design big rockets? Well, this slide's the first set. This is the rocket that we sent the first humans in space on. Next slide. Here's the first rocket that was used to send Americans into space, Alan Shepard and John Glenn. Here's the Atlas rocket, John Glenn. Notice the slight differences in the rockets. Next one. The V-2 rocket, this originally started as a missile in World War II invented by the Germans, and we took that same type of technology and applied it to the modern rockets that we have today to explore space. Next one. This one is really interesting because you go into why did we design big rockets like that? If you go through and look at all the different types of rockets out there, this one was the rocket that sent men to the moon back in the 1960s, and so it had to be really big to travel a really long distance. And it also had to be reliable and safe enough to be able to carry humans. Next one. A rocket like this is what the Air Force uses to send satellites into space. For example, communication satellites and weather satellites. There are things you might want to discuss with them and note that there's 3 different rockets on this one rocket. And the reason is because each of the 2 smaller rockets have fuel that provides extra thrust and momentum to the rocket to get a payload into space. And then look at the space shuttle. The space shuttle looks a lot different than a lot of the rockets that you had seen in the other slides, and that's because we send humans to space with it, so it's got to be reliable for humans. It has wings on it. so that it can land and glide back to Earth, whereas the other rockets that send satellites into space don't have to. So a lot of this, there's a lot more discussion in your lesson plan. But if you want to provoke them, have them think about why rockets are different sizes, different shapes, possibly what future rockets might look like as well. In terms of activities, there's a bunch of activities that are listed online. You might want to check them out. One of the suggestions was the balloon exercises I had mentioned, possibly getting some different pieces of cardboard and having them glue it to the balloon to try to make fins and see if they can stabilize the movement of the balloon a little bit better.